Hi guys. So last chapter, chapter 11, we were taking a look at price takers, and in this chapter we start to switch the focus into price makers, or firms with market power. Now, the way that I like to divide this up is I like to look at the kind of the pumpkin example, which we did in chapter 11, and now switch focus into the cable TV example. But I should mention that chapter 12 does divide up the chapter into monopoly, which you could kind of associate a little bit with cable TV, and monopolistic competition. And we're not tonight going to cover the monopolistic competition. Next week in class, we'll talk about monopolistic competition and oligopoly, and we'll talk a little bit about price discrimination. So in a sense, we're going to cover a little bit of chapter 12 next week, a lot of chapter 13, and a little bit of chapter 14. And that'll pretty much wrap up the course. So let's get started with chapter 12. Once again, we're only going to cover monopoly, but let's get started here. So I mentioned the word market power. What does this really actually mean? This means the ability of a firm to raise a price without losing all of its sales. So any firm that faces a downward sloping demand curve has market power. Recall back to the last chapter. Did perfectly competitive firms face a downward sloping demand curve? The answer is no. That was, if you recall back, the elasticity of that curve ended up showing us a complete horizontal curve, no slope whatsoever. So market power gives the firm the ability to raise its price above average cost and earn economic profit if demand and cost conditions permit. What's a monopoly? A monopoly is a single firm that produces and sells a good or service for which there's no good substitutes, and new firms are prevented from entering the market because of barriers to entry. Something like Ticketmaster used to be a good example of a monopoly. You could think of electricity companies maybe. I mean, cable TV is really not a monopoly because obviously there's Verizon, there's Comcast. They're close. You could probably think of a variety of different sources of what could constitute or be close to a monopoly in terms of market power. So how do you measure market power? The degree of market power is inversely related to the elasticity of demand. So the less elastic the firm's demand, the greater its degree of market power. The fewer close substitutes for a firm's product, the smaller the elasticity of demand and the greater the firm's market power. And when demand is perfectly elastic, the firm has no market power. So how are we going to go about measuring market power? There's something called a Lerner index, which measures the proportionate amount by which the price exceeds its marginal cost. This would be 0 under perfect competition. It increases as market power increases. It could also be equal to -1 over the elasticity, which shows that the index will vary inversely with elasticity. And the lower the elasticity in demand, the absolute value, the greater the index and the degree of market power. So this is what the Lerner index looks like. It's the price less the marginal cost over the price. In layman's terms, because I don't think this definition is terribly important here, the more inelastic the demand, the greater the Lerner index, the greater the market power. Another alternative that you could use is this. So another measurement of market power. If consumers view two goods as substitutes, cross-price elasticity will be positive. And the higher the cross-price elasticity, the greater its substitutability between two goods, and the smaller the degree of market power between the two firms. I do think that another alternative here that is not mentioned is what's called the HHI index. And this is a Herfindahl-Hirschman index, and that's a really good measure of market power and concentration as well. You can take a look at that at your leisure. If you ever do want to study an industrial organization and market power in different industries and kind of use that in some sort of model or something like that, HHI is probably the best measurement of market concentration. Okay. Other factors of monopolies, barriers to entry. Entry of new firms into the market erodes market power of existing firms by increasing the number of substitutes. A firm can possess a high degree of market power only when strong barriers to entry exist. Conditions that make it difficult for new firms to enter a market in which economic profits are being earned is a case under barriers to entry. So you can think of like competitors for Microsoft or Google. It's really hard to enter into certain industries. Common barriers to entry: economies of scale. When long-run average costs declined over a wide range of output relative to demand for the product, there may not be room for another large producer to enter the market. So economies of scale is certainly an entry barrier. Barriers created by government could be licenses, exclusive franchises. Government-created barriers generally are there to try to promote research and development. Essential input barriers. One firm controls a crucial input in the production process. In order to create a good or service, one firm may draw access to that input. Brand loyalties are another common entry barrier. Strong customer allegiance to existing firms may keep new firms from finding enough buyers to make entry worthwhile. Common entry barriers continued. Consumer lock-in. Potential entrants may be deterred if they believe there's high switching costs, which will keep them from inducing many customers to change brands. Network externalities. This one could be printers or razors. Network externalities. These occur when benefit or utility of a product increases as more consumers buy and use it. Make it difficult for new firms to enter the market where firms have to establish a large base. Social networks are probably an example here. Okay, let's get into some of the specifics on monopoly, but this won't take quite as long as it did last chapter. Market demand curve is the firm's demand curve. Monopolists must lower the price to sell an additional unit of output, and the marginal revenue is less than the price for all but the first unit sold. So when marginal revenue is positive, demand is elastic. When it's negative, demand is inelastic. And for a linear demand curve, the marginal revenue is also linear, and it has the same vertical intercept as demand, but is twice as steep. So we should be familiar with this at this point, right? So you guys should be familiar with this curve because we talked about it in the past already. So let's talk about short-run profit maximization for a monopoly. The monopolist will produce where marginal revenue equals short-run marginal costs. So this should be straightforward. As long as total revenue at least covers the firm's total avoidable cost. The price for this output is given by the demand curve. So they're going to produce at marginal revenue equals short-run marginal costs, just like perfect competition. If total revenue is less than total variable cost, the firm shuts down, loses only fixed costs. If price is greater than average total cost, the firm makes a profit. And if average total cost is greater than the price, which is greater than the average variable cost, the firm incurs a loss but continues to produce in the short run. Okay, so the distinction between what we've seen for perfect competition and monopoly is pretty straightforward. Your short-run marginal cost curve intersects the marginal revenue curve here. And if you recall back to perfect competition, that marginal revenue curve equaled the price or the demand curve. But that's not the case with monopoly. There's an actual demand curve here or the price. So in other words, you find where short-run marginal cost curve intersects the marginal revenue curve, and then monopolists jack up the price up to the demand curve. So first they find that point, then they go up to the demand curve. Why do they do that? Because they can. They have the ability to price higher than that, where the marginal cost equals the marginal revenue curve. So the monopolist maximizes profit by choosing to produce where marginal revenue equals the long-run marginal cost as long as the price is greater than the long-run average cost. It'll exit if the price is less than the long-run average cost. The monopolist will adjust plant size to the optimal level, And the optimal plant level is where the short-run average cost curve is tangent to the long-run average cost at the profit maximizing output level. And this would occur here. Okay, we are going to end here, and we're going to talk more about monopolistic competition and oligopoly next week. We will also talk a little bit about price discrimination. Please shoot me an email with any questions that you have throughout the week. Be happy to answer them. And please keep in mind that you're going to need to prepare your essay still for next week, your extra credit assignment as well, and you are going to have your logbook due as well. So there's a lot to do over the course of the next week, but you have some time to do it. So get started. If you have questions along the way, shoot me an email or give me a call. All right, talk to you soon.